So in today's video, we are going to be discussing why the Jacksonville Jaguars might be one of the most interesting teams in the entire NFL. Now, before we get into the video, please consider liking and subscribing, and let's jump right into the video. So it feels kind of weird to consider the Jacksonville Jaguars as maybe the most interesting team in the entire NFL, mainly surrounding their free agency and the things that the Jacksonville Jaguars have done in free agency and the way that they've structured their team. Because as a football fan, you could argue there are a million other storylines that you could consider more interesting than the Jacksonville Jaguars. Because as a football fan, I find the Dolphins to be an interesting team. I find the entire AFC West to be interesting. I find Tampa Bay to be interesting to see what's going to happen with Tom Brady unretiring. You know, you have all these teams that even one little move that, you know, the Giants bringing in Brian Dable, one little move can make a team interesting. And it makes you intrigued to see what they're going to do going into the next season. But for me, Jacksonville, they were the one team that made a huge splash in free agency, and they're really a team that I think has a lot of interest and might draw a lot of eyeballs heading into next season. I really do feel like more fans are going to be tuned in possibly to the Jacksonville Jaguars than in years past. I really do think that this really could be the turning point for the Jacksonville Jaguars and them being just a really bad franchise. So if we're looking at their offseason, they've had a great offseason by every single possible metric and the way that they've structured their team and the players that they've added. Adding Doug Pederson as their head coach after the mess that was Urban Meyer, you know, every situation with Urban Meyer was a mess. He signing Tim Tebow, he kicked the kicker, he's calling coaches losers. The bar incident, you know, where he didn't fly home with the team after losing to the Bengals on Thursday Night Football. But those are just a few of the issues. Like, the entire Urban Meyer tenure was just an absolute disaster, and the Jacksonville Jaguars were able to move off of Urban Meyer, and then they signed Doug Pederson as their head coach, which I think is a fantastic move, and I think he's going to improve Jacksonville a little bit. Now, that last season with Philadelphia wasn't necessarily the best thing going for Doug Pederson, because the whole Carson Wentz, Jalen Hurts fiasco, you know, kind of Hurts getting his feelings hurt, and then, you know, Jalen Hurts coming in. You know, the Eagles were just kind of a mess down the stretch of that season. Nothing really good was to come out of it, but you know, Carson Wentz wasn't playing particularly well, and I think Doug Pederson was just kind of put in a really, really rough spot that final year in Philadelphia. But he was able to win a Super Bowl with Nick Foles, of all people. And that's not to discredit Nick Foles, but that was a very magical run that Nick Foles and Doug Pederson had in Philadelphia. So, you know, there's a lot of good things that Doug Pederson is going to bring to the Jacksonville Jaguars and improve this team very quickly, I think. But then you also have to look at the huge spending spree that the Jacksonville Jaguars went. Now, when you're a bad football team and you have money to spend, this is something that you could kind of expect. But the Jacksonville Jaguars kind of did what the Patriots did last year, albeit the Patriots haven't been a terrible team for, you know, their entire existence, albeit, you know, one year for Jacksonville where they almost made it to the Super Bowl. But the Jacksonville Jaguars spent a lot of money. $259.5 million is the number I saw. So they spent a lot of money in free agency. They broke the bank with Christian Kirk, signing him a 4-year, $72 million contract with $37 million guaranteed. That was kind of the first deal of the offseason that kind of just wowed everybody. And then you have paying Zay Jones 3 years, $24 million with $14 million guaranteed. So they're getting Trevor Lawrence some help offensively. They added Evan Ingram on a 1-year, $9 million deal, 8.25 guaranteed. They added O-line help with Brandon Sheriff. They added pieces to their defense, you know, including Darius Williams. But they've made moves that should help both offensively and defensively. And I really do think that you look at those moves, and I think that the Jaguars are making the right moves and are heading in the right direction of becoming a legitimate team. And now, legit might not be the best word for it. The Jaguars are becoming a team that they're trying to get that persona of being the laughing stock of the NFL off their shoulders, because I really like, it's pretty obvious. Like, the Jaguars have been one of the biggest laughing stocks in the NFL for a really, really long time. Like, they've been a poverty franchise. They've been really bad. And it just seems like right now the Jaguars are trying to make the right moves, the big moves that are trying to help their teams. And they're adding a head coach that knows what he's doing, that shouldn't bring distractions, that shouldn't be the focal point. So I think bringing in Doug Pederson will hopefully focus more in on the football rather than everything else that's not the football. But if you're looking at this team on paper and what they've done, the Jaguars should be a much better team heading into next year, especially with them owning the number 1 overall pick in this year's draft. That's the thing. They've made huge moves in the offseason, moves that I'm a fan of. Again, they may have been overpaying, and I completely agree with people if they think that the Jaguars are overpaid. You know, Christian Kirk, never bash an athlete for getting money because their career could be over tomorrow, and this might be the last that we see of them. So that them taking their money, there's no fault in an athlete taking their money. They should take literally as much as they possibly can. Now, if we're looking at the business side of it, you know, from just a talking standpoint, yeah, you know, Christian Kirk might have been overpaid, but you know, they're making the moves. That's the thing. They're making the moves. That's the one thing I can't fault about the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jaguars are making the moves. And that's something if you're a Jaguars fan, I would think that you would have to appreciate that. Like, the Jaguars are at least showing interest that they care instead of showing more interest in a wrestling company, because Tony Khan owns a freaking wrestling company that seems like he cares more about at times than the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, it might be his dad that, you know, runs the Jaguars, whatever it is. That family just seems that they care more about AEW than they do about football at times, because that seems like the main product that they're putting their heart and soul into. But it really does feel like that they're changing what they're doing in Jacksonville. Now, is it too early to say that? Of course, it's way too early to say that. But again, like I was mentioning, on paper, the moves that the Jaguars are making, they're moving in a direction that I don't want to laugh at them anymore. I'm like, okay, the Jaguars are at least a little bit serious about making moves to make them better. Now, did they get the best talent in the world? No, they didn't, but at least you can tell that they're trying. And if you're a Jaguars fan, you got to appreciate that they're trying. But with all of that being said, this is going to be a tough team to judge for a couple of reasons. One, you have to throw the Trevor Lawrence season that he had last year out the window. That season didn't count. It's really hard to judge Trevor Lawrence based off that season, because even the 2 games that really stick out for the Jaguars from last year, you're looking at, you know, them upsetting the Buffalo Bills and playing a great game there, and then them winning against the Colts. You know, those are 2 games that you can take in the next season, because that Colts game, you know, the Jaguars had nothing to play for. They played loose football. They just went out there and they played ball, and they played well, and they eliminated the Colts from playoff contention. So that's something that, you know, you can build off. If I'm the Jaguars and I'm the front office and I'm the players, those are the 2 games that I take in the next season. You can even take that Thursday night football game that you lost against the Bengals, because that game was not bad. That was a really good football game. So those are 3 games that they could take in the next season and build off of. But if you're looking at Trevor Lawrence as just a whole, ignore it. Just throw Trevor Lawrence's rookie season out of the window. Never happened, and it doesn't count. You can't judge Trevor Lawrence based off of what happened last year. But another point with them being tough to judge is because they've always been a really bad franchise. What's their ceiling of wins? I don't think they're a playoff team now. That's the thing. I don't think the Jaguars are a playoff team, but I think they're a team that has a chance week in and week out, at least right now on paper, to at least make some noise and win some games. You know, I think they're maybe a 6 to 8 win team right now. They're still a losing record, but that's better than what they are now. I think they have the first overall pick this year. They're going to improve a little bit. They're going to, you know, go from 3 wins to possibly 6 to 8 wins, which I think is a realistic expectation for the Jaguars right now. And then, you know, you're going to have a fairly solid draft pick this next season. Then you can take that pick, improve the team again, and then maybe we're talking about possibly being a wild card team in a year from now. Maybe I would expect that if we want to put any expectations on the Jaguars, I would say give it at least 1 more year. And then in a year, we'll talk about the Jaguars possibly being a playoff team. The problem is it's the Jaguars, and they have a history of being bad, and they've had 1 notable season, and nobody from that team is even on the team anymore. And so that's why the Jaguars, they're a tough team to judge. But at the end of the day, I thought the Jaguars, this is a video I've wanted to make for a long time, ever since free agency started and since Jacksonville started making moves. This team is very interesting. This team is making really good moves. And the Jaguars, as weird as it is to say, they're a team that I cannot wait to see how they perform next season. But those are my thoughts on why I think the Jacksonville Jaguars might be one of the most interesting teams heading into next season. But give me your thoughts down below. Who do you think is the most interesting team? And do you find the Jacksonville Jaguars to be a fairly interesting team heading into next year? And I'll see you in the next one.